Grossi Posse Packer Nation, welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom Grossi, and today we got a very special guest. Once again, for the third time, one would say the third time is the charm, we have the president and CEO of the Green Bay Packers, Mr. Mark Murphy. Mark, appreciate you coming back again.
No, it's my pleasure. Always a pleasure.
I think, so we've done this now. The first one, I remember we had like a 90-minute interview. And the thing I always tell people is the story you told me about Washington, like hiding you away in the draft, because like that is one of the greatest stories I've ever heard. Not in terms of like wanting to be drafted, but in terms of just like, can't believe that's how things have worked, considering things are so different now.
Well, it tells you a lot about George Allen, too.
Yeah. So, that was an experience, but I appreciate you coming back. So kind of like just to jump into things and how things are going on here. Fans are back, which is a very nice change of pace. Family night, training camp, kind of like what is the vibe around Lambeau Field? Just the fact that like people are back finally.
Yeah, no, everybody's excited to have fans back. I think though with the Delta variant, there's a little, we're all kind of like holding our breath, like, because it's so great to have everybody back, but you just worry. In some ways, this year has been harder and more difficult to manage than last year. Last year it was, we know we weren't going to have fans, and we had rules and protocols, and we followed them. Now it's kind of up to us to decide.
Correct.
Is it safe to have fans in the stands? And you do have this real sense of responsibility, but I do. I think things are going well so far. I mean, at training camp, I think we've had good crowds for all the games. Family night, if we don't have a thunderstorm for family night, is it
we really
won't know
family
what to
night
do.
then?
Yeah, that's what we said. We should have family morning in the future, maybe to make sure we don't have thunderstorms. But yeah, it was disappointing, but I think we still had a good practice. Matt was pleased with it, and we're going to play some games in weather like that.
Yeah.
So it's
just matching the elements. Yeah, I mean, it was crazy because, like, of course, even though I've done it so many times, like, did the stadium tour, of course, because why not? Yeah. So did that yesterday, and, like, you saw, like, peanuts and, like, popcorn, and I'm like, what happened here? And then, like, I realized, like, it was family night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just, and it's for all sporting events, just, like, kind of that element that was so, like, missing and absent, right? Yeah. And it was just, like, it's just a completely different environment. Like, you could pipe in as much noise as you want, like you're the Vikings, but, like, you can't replicate it.
Yeah. So, well, especially Lambeau Field. It's such a unique atmosphere.
Correct.
And, so it's going to be, it was great for family night, and we're fortunate enough we have 2 home preseason games, and we're looking forward to it. It'll be exciting. Hopefully we can get the pandemic under control.
That's another conversation for a different day. Yeah. In terms of kind of this off season, so relatively quiet, not a lot going on, just not a lot of media coverage.
The master of understatement.
Just just rhythm just keeps on going. So obviously an off season that was different, and I mean, I'm just going to speak personally. I was really looking forward to the draft this year, and I was like, there's going to be no drama. It's going to be so nice. Yeah. And then Adam Schefter ruined my draft. he did it. And obviously all that stuff happened. And I don't even really want to start there. And this is something that we've talked about before. So you get named president and CEO in 2007. Mm-hmm. 2008, Brett Favre was traded to the Jets.
Yeah.
Like, feed into
something happened between.
Yeah.
He didn't just get traded.
No. So like that whole saga goes on, right? So for you being new in that position, like what is it like to be faced with something that's so monumental, like right out of the gate?
Yeah, I think in retrospect, it was probably a really positive thing in terms of especially my working relationship with Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy at the time. It's very similar. I mean, this offseason, Brian, Matt, Russ Ball, and I mean, we have met and talked more than you can imagine. So I think it's been positive. Obviously, it's challenging and difficult to go through situations like that. But I mean that's kind of the irony is that we moved on from Favre and put all our faith and confidence in Aaron, and pretty not too much time after that, we won the Super Bowl, and obviously Aaron's gone on to a great career.
Worked out pretty well.
Yeah, that's I've told people, it was a difficult time, and we had confidence that Aaron could be a good player, but we really didn't have. There wasn't a lot of proof,
Sure.
and fortunately, we've proven to be not only a good player but a Hall of Fame caliber player.
Yeah. And the thing that sticks out to me was like that viral clip that went viral years and years ago with Ted Thompson getting like confronted by a fan saying that Rodgers is going to take us to the toilet bowl and Brett Favre to the Super Bowl. How difficult is it to kind of like deal with like the perception of the front office when like the media is running rampant, like the fans have their own perception. So how difficult it is to kind of like manage a situation like that while also maintaining like the trust of the fan base.
Yeah, no, it's you raise a good point. It is. Our fans are very vocal, and which one of the things that's great about our fans is, that they have a stronger sense of connection to the team because of the ownership structure.
Yeah.
And so, I hear from a lot of fans, it was, I think in 2008, being relatively new to the organization, I didn't really know, what to expect or what was a little more attention than Colgate and Northwestern. But having obviously been in the position now, I appreciate it, and the passion that our fans have, it's unbelievable, and I have heard from a lot of fans. You get it from both positive and negative perspectives, but I think you have to you can't ride the emotions of what's going on in the media, and I think one of the most important things is, in terms of the administration and as well as the coaching staff, is just open and honest communication.
Sure.
And that's been crucial. It was very beneficial in 2008, and I think it has been this year.
Sure. And because Murphy Take 5, like I can only imagine the emails that you're just like, yep, this is.
Well, Murphy Takes 5 is public, so anybody.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, here we go. Yeah. We're just gonna get all these.
I get a lot. There's one guy that just keeps writing, and he has yet to. It's supposed to be questions.
These are statements, sir.
Yeah, he hasn't written a question yet, but he's let me know his opinion.
I'm sure he's very vocal about that. Yeah, in terms of like, because you mentioned like the media, right? Yeah. So while this was going on in the off season, there was like relative silence, right, from both camps, like kind of keeping it in house, what have you. Adam Schefter breaks the news, and so it's speculation city, right? If I'm sitting on draft night with 12,000 people in a chat, basically like we're waiting for Aaron Rodgers to get traded because everyone's saying that he is, right? Yeah. And the problem is, in terms of when there's silence for both camps, not that that's an issue, it's just the media fills in the gaps, right? Sure. Media, talking heads, what have you. So
when you're talking about the reigning MVP in the National Football League, there's a lot of interest in that.
Just a little bit, just a tiny bit. So in terms of being vocal with the fan base, or like trying to control some type of narrative or what have you, is there any influence from like the media? Because we heard everything, right? From want Goody to be fired to like he's going to the Broncos to he's going to this, and we heard all of this stuff, and like that's what it was. It was just all this noise. Sure. So like, is there an inclination to kind of like get out and be like, hey, like here's what's going on, or is it more of a we want to keep this insulated in-house, to kind of maintain like that relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is a little bit of a fine line. Yeah. You don't want to get into a verbal sparring war with your most important player.
Correct.
So you balance it a little bit, and obviously with something like Murphy Takes Five, on a monthly basis, I connect with the fans, and
Sure.
we talked a lot about it. If I didn't say anything about it, it would be, like you're tone deaf. I mean,
Sure.
this is the biggest issue affecting the organization,
Absolutely.
and so tried to deal with it. But so I think in the column right after it broke, talked about that this is something we've been working on, and I do think it has, and it's not putting blame on either side, but it has divided our fans. I mean, it's the same.
Yes.
It was the same thing with the Favre situation.
Yep.
There were fans that were loyal to Favre. There were fans that were loyal to the organization, and it was very similar. But that all said, it was really nice to have him back.
And the kind of point that I was driving is like, it doesn't need to be a division. Like, it doesn't need to be like a pick a side. It could just be like, hey, like, we want everyone to do well, like, and move on with our happy days. Like, back in camp, great, wonderful. Like, let's kind of like turn the page and see what happens.
Sure. Yeah.
Because like the media, the way that they handled it. So like, I'm sure you heard plenty. So like at one point you said complicated fella, and I'm hearing this and I'm like, okay, like, I don't think that's like, but Twitter disagreed, and and people like went nuts, right? And basically were, like, screaming and like, how could they say that, the whole 9 yards? Just the reaction was so extreme, right?
Sure.
In terms of every little piece of information was taken and amplified to the max, right? Mm-hmm. So in terms of, trying to have negotiations and like all this stuff coming out in the media, like, does that have any impact on the actual conversations that are going on? Or is it kind of like, hey, like, let's block out all the noise?
No, you try to block it all out. I mean, it was all speculation. I mean, the media, nobody knew anything.
Correct.
But it's, I mean, we were tried to be as careful as possible to not have anything leak out. But
of course,
things were.
People.
There's a lot of speculation. I'll just say that.
No, I don't doubt that. And again, the line that kind of has been repeated is like, committed to Aaron 2021 and beyond, right? In terms of like not even getting into specifics or like logistics, obviously before things changed with the contract, had 3 more years, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a way to display that commitment besides like financials in terms of like, obviously you have a contract. Is there a way that like from an organization standpoint that you can kind of like display that like, you utilized? Yeah,
well, obviously the contract is the main way, but I mean, there's other issues that are important to Aaron, and and showing him that he'll be more involved in decisions that affect the team, I think will be helpful. But I mean, it's hard to put things like that in writing.
Yeah, of course, exactly. Like, it's like handshake deals, and and it's conversations, 100%. And some of the stuff that like started to come out, kind of like moving away from the off season, like James Jones said something like while all of this was going on and both camps were relatively quiet. Sure. This was something that was said in a press conference in regards to like players leaving, right? Mm-hmm. And like how that is handled. And I had like a couple of questions in regards to that. So for players, like super emotional, right? Mm-hmm. Anytime it's like the end of a tenure with a team or an end of a career or what have you, right? Always going to be an emotional thing. Income is going away. You have roots within an organization, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you balance the business side of like being the gatekeepers of the organization, right, while also managing people and all the emotions that come along with it?
Yeah, you're right. It is difficult. The average career in the NFL is 3 years. My experience, in terms of as a player and how my career ended, it was really ugly. I mean, but so I've, based on what I've always tried to treat all our players fairly, and you have to make difficult decisions. Usually, for most players, there's injury involved. And so, you want them to feel as though they're treated fairly. And the other thing, obviously, with the salary cap system we have, it's often their financial decisions. You'd love to keep everybody, but you've got to weigh a lot of different things that you take into consideration. And,
Sure.
I have great respect for Ted Thompson and, both Brian, I think, feel the same way it's a tough business and you have to make difficult decisions, but you still can make them in a way where the players feel at least they've been treated fairly
and respected. Yeah. And that's
what Ted always said, we should treat them like they're our own sons.
Yeah. So in terms of you've had players think that things could have been handled differently, and again, it's subjective, right? So it's going to vary from player to player. Yeah. So how do you, I guess, again, display that level of respect towards a player while also telling them hey, we're
I think you just have to be honest. It's this is why we're making the decision to move on, and I think the transition is harder the longer you're the longer you play, and especially if you're just in one organization. I know, James Jones came back, and Randall Cobb's back now, and I think having kind of been through the league and been to other teams, you have a little different perspective.
Sure.
We're very unique, I think, because of our ownership structure.
Agreed.
The fan support that we have, and obviously we don't have a rich, deep-pocketed owner, and I think by and large, I think that's more of a positive for us, the ownership structure that we have. But there's obviously some great organizations out there, but it is about the people, not organizational structure.
Very much so.
Yeah.
In terms of when it's time to evaluate a player and potentially move on, and salary cap, contracts, financials, I'm going to kind of put that to the side because that's pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah.
Especially with what happened with COVID and how structured things are and not a lot of wiggle room. How do you go about as an organization determining when it's time to move on from a player or coach? Because we've had scenarios where whether it was a coach and the statistics, the stats started declining a bit and then a decision was made, or there's a player and you mentioned injury, what is kind of considered when moving on from anyone within the organization?
Yeah, well, obviously it's very different between coaches and players. I think from a player perspective, a lot of it is injury history, age.
Sure.
Salary is oftentimes can it's kind of a as your salary gets higher, and sometimes it's, do we want to extend them, or and if they have an opportunity to go on somewhere, you can look at it and it's probably not worth trying to match it.
Yeah.
So I think with a lot of players, it does come down to kind of their age and what's the chance of them being able to continue to stay healthy.
Yeah,
it's really difficult to predict those things. I mean, you've had players.
It's a gamble.
They are injured all the time the first couple of years, and you think that's a pattern, and then they go on to have great careers after that. So no, it's kind of like the draft is it's a guess.
You do the bet. Yeah, exactly. You're just throwing darts at the board and be like, I hope this does well. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you have to have trust in your process, and and the medical opinions are very important, and it's not just injuries; it's the aging process. I know there's a movie out now about where you're aging really quickly, but the NFL is kind of like that. You age. Just your body, the wear and tear on your body, and and I know our scouts and Brian. There's things that you look at and that you can see. Just the players aren't moving at the same way they did early in their careers. But there's players like that are just freaks that
It's we're never just going to keep playing forever. Yeah.
Like Charles Woodson. 18 years as a defensive back. It's. Unbelievable.
Now Hall of Famer. Yeah, I think, and just to focus on players before we move to coaches, in terms of those, like, I guess those intangibles, like there's been a lot of talk about like high character players, right? Is that, I don't even say is that even considered, but is that something that like kind of crosses the mind of like how they are in the locker room?
Oh,
so
yeah,
maybe
no,
like
you,
their
you
production
look at,
has tailed
well, you
off,
look at
right?
everything. I mean,
Sure.
Character, I view it more as leadership. Are they somebody that is going to help lift the team?
Sure.
There's a lot of different things you take into consideration, and a lot of times it's like you said, with whether it's a draft or scouting, it's kind of a feel. And if you have, the longer you've been at it, you've got a lot of experience, and
more often than not you hit, and then, you're not. In terms of coaches, so like you said that like that's a very different process, right? Because you don't have to worry about injury.
Hopefully not.
Exactly, right? So like what is that process like when potentially moving on from a coach, whether it's a head coach or whether, it's anyone really on the staff?
Yeah, well, the staff, obviously that's the head coach's responsibility. The head coach, obviously, I think you look at, kind of success you're having on the field, but how are the players responding to them? I was fortunate enough, had about a 16-year career as an athletic director, so I worked with coaches of all different sports, male and female, and I think you just get a sense of when maybe the message is getting old, and how the players are responding. A lot of it with coaches is, well, first of all, the successful coaches all are great communicators. And if that kind of breaks down and you don't see the open and honest communication with the team, and it's a challenge because I think you see a lot of situations in the NFL where every 2 years you're hiring a new head coach.
Correct.
And a lot of it is, it's not all the coach, it's also what kind of support is provided, and what kind of relationship do you have with the general manager and other people in the organization.
Sure. Yeah, and because for coaches, you can see like we've had, thankfully, a run of coaches that have had long tenures in Green Bay, right? Yeah. And they've been very successful. Whether you look at McCarthy or whether you look at Matt, who's lost only 6 regular season games in his 2 years. And I think that for fans, like some look at that, and whether it's defensive coordinators or whether it's just other members on the staff, they're like, oh, like maybe things are slipping, like they should have been potentially like relieved years earlier, and we don't know the inner workings of things. And relating that to players, like it seems like there's this mentality of like it's better to move on like that year too early rather than that year too late kind of thing. Can you speak to like that mantra, if like that holds any weight, like because you don't want to be stuck with like a contract and like it kind of backfires? And so if they go on to be successful, like good for them, I'm very happy for them, but like we don't want to be like caught footing the bill.
Yeah, there are some old sayings in the NFL, and you mentioned one, better to move on a year or two early than too late. Another issue, and this is not so much quarterbacks as other, is be careful on third contracts. Especially, I've heard the only time a third contract makes sense is for Hall of Famers. Is just
valid.
Yeah. So, but so much of it is, and it's really been challenging this past year or so with the salary cap for the first time and forever going down
the other way.
Yeah. So you really having to make really difficult decisions from a financial standpoint.
Of course. Yeah. Because like the Packers have been a very successful organization, right? And that is due to, in like major part, for the players, staff, front office, right? The way that they do things. And in terms of like, as time goes on and situations arise, whatever the situation may be, right? Exceptions, things that you didn't see coming. Yeah. Is there an inclination to kind of stick with the traditional way that the Packers have always done things? Or is it handled like by like a case-by-case basis, and it's like a willingness to almost adapt to like, oh, like this is something that we didn't look at before?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that we really do try to look at each situation as it's brand new, but
Sure.
obviously you have a history, and we have been successful. But I think we're also constantly evolving, and things change.
Yeah.
Well, particularly during the pandemic, and with the salary cap going down, I think you have to adjust. You can't just be business as usual.
Yeah, and you look at, you mentioned like Randall Cobb coming back. I'm very much a believer on focus on this season, right? Because like, who knows what's happening tomorrow, kind of thing.
Well, no.
We know, but like in terms of, you look at next year, right? It's like 50 million already like over the cap, which is a very different way than things are used to. And you mentioned, of course, a big part in that is because of the salary cap not going up and all of these things.
Sure.
I know you and I have had conversations in regards to, especially with Ted, in terms of there's so many people that are just like, just go all in, right? Like, go to free agency, like go and bring in all these guys. And sometimes it works like the Broncos, and sometimes it doesn't work. And, you don't win a title.
Yeah.
What is your kind of feeling about this season, considering like, as a Packers fan, this is probably the most like all in terms of how fans would define it, that we've been in a long, long time.
Although we've got a lot of really good young players too, so there's a mix. Ideally, I mean, you want to field a team every year where you can legitimately compete for a Super Bowl while also building for the future. And I know, I mean, you look back and Ted drafting Aaron was when we had Brett Favre was probably his very best draft pick. Yeah. And I know at the time there was some criticism of it, and
just a few, but
that's the balance. But I mean, the reality in our league now, especially if you don't have an elite franchise quarterback, you can't really compete for a championship.
It's a little bit more difficult.
We have that, fortunately. I know you hate to talk about windows, but I do think window is definitely open for us.
No, I agree. And in terms of, like, I think that everybody's happy to just focus on like this season, right? We can talk about future, we can talk about beyond, but like at this point, it's like, we have football. Aaron Rodgers is here. Like, let's just play football and
enjoy what we have.
Exactly, right? And just like kind of be like grateful for that. One of the things that we talked about really early on, and this was back in 2016, like when we had conversations, Titletown was still being built. Like, this is all new, expansive, what have you. And one of the big things that you have mentioned to me time and time again is the importance of trying to host the draft.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. For you, like, what would that mean to like the city of Green Bay? Like, obviously there's a ton of revenue and things like that, but like, is there something more than just like, we're hosting the draft?
Well, I think, first of all, it would be a great source of pride for the entire community. If the draft does come here, the main reason will be because of the history and tradition of Lambeau Field and Green Bay. I think our ownership structure is so unique, and I think it really highlights the very best things about the NFL. We'll find out. We should find out in October whether or not we'll be hosting. It would be for 2024. If we don't get it, we'll continue to.
More hotels.
No, but we'll. I mean, so it's not just. I mean, we're going to put in for 25, 20. Well, we wouldn't do it in 26 because we're hosting the. We'll be hosting the Notre Dame. Wisconsin game. Yeah.
Unfortunately canceled last year. That was.
Yeah, I know.
But
no, but from an economic perspective, it'd be a huge boon to the local economy, and it's the second biggest event now that the league has behind the Super Bowl.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. In terms of building up Titletown, you going through your tenure here, which we've covered extensively in other conversations. Yeah. So the Packers, and I think like this was not well known for like a lot of the fan base, like they have a mandatory like retirement age of 70.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So Yeah, 4 more years, right? So I was on the stadium tour yesterday, and a lot of the conversation was about Bob Harlan and all the things that Bob Harlan did, right?
Sure.
And like that was his legacy. In terms of what you've done in Green Bay and what you hope to accomplish in like these next 4 years, what would you want your legacy to be, like as being the president of the Packers?
Well, first and foremost would be winning championships. So I'd like to get a few more. That would be nice. Yeah. I mean, winning championships. I think realistically, Titletown will probably be part of my legacy. I think that's been really nice addition for the community. In Lambeau Field, we've continued to invest in it, and obviously nothing as major as the renovation that Bob oversaw in 2003, but adding the south end zone and some of the amenities, Johnsonville Tailgate Village. I think we've really, with the addition of Titletown, we've really made Green Bay more of a destination. And so I think we've had a great relationship with the city. And the mayor of Ashwaubenon has been tremendous to work with, and the chamber. And, it's been really positive.
Yeah. Is there anything that like you would want it to be, right? So like we mentioned all these accolades and like these accomplishments, and I agree, Titletown's a big one, like, and all these,
sure,
of course, championships. In terms of like how you would want to be written about and described, like when I take a stadium tour again and within the next decade and they're talking about Mark Murphy, like what do you hope that people say about that? Or you're just like, listen, say whatever you
I really can't. I don't think about that. I mean, it's, I've got my hands full just
a little bit.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's hard to believe this is my 14th year, and but yeah, I'll leave that to others to figure out, what my legacy will be.
Yeah. No. Fair enough. No. Well, Mark, it has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on again. Got a lot going on around Lambeau. And like you said, it is most definitely a destination. But I appreciate you, and best of luck with the season.
All right. Well, thank you, Tom. It's always a pleasure.
And as always, go Pack, go.